Good afternoon. Today is Monday, June 7th. This is a meeting of the Solar Task Force. And I wanted to begin by noting that we're near the end, and so producing our report. With that said, let's begin, first of all, taking the roll. So my name is Michael Kane. I'm the chair of the task force. Bonnie Kellenberger. Bonnie appears to be absent. Jeff Shaw.
Present.
Brian Thomas.
Here.
And Mike Thompson. He also appears to be not yet here. So regardless, that's a quorum. We're going to begin the meeting. We have remotely joining us Les Knapp, who will be here. Sandy Green is also with us remotely today, so welcome to both of you. With this call to order, we'll begin the meeting with the approval of the minutes. So you all have a copy of the minutes there. Would you please take a look at them and make sure they look correct? Thank you, Sandy, for generating these minutes. Any concerns about the minutes? None? Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved from the last meeting of May 12th, 2021. And with that, we'll begin. We really have, although it says recommendations, continue the discussion of the draft recommendations of utility solar. I believe we have completed that. And if that's incorrect, please someone correct me. Les, these are completed, are they not?
That is correct.
Yeah. So the real business here today, everyone, is to go through this, the beginning of this full report. Les Knapp, our consultant and standby to this committee, to the task force, has provided us and all of us this weekend with a report, and we're going to be going through that report today. I know, Les, you worked very hard on this report and got it to us, prior to the weekend. And I know committee members may not have had a chance to review the entire document just yet. So I appreciate that. You may not have gone through that entire document, but we still have a remaining meeting so that you will have a chance to go through this document and completely. Regardless, we'll kind of walk through it today and see how far we can get in terms of recommendations that we can provide and additional guidance to you, Les, so that you can continue writing this and making changes. And so that will be the main topic of today's meeting, to provide you with additional guidance to finish this report, Les. Les, do you have any comments on that?
No, I appreciate all of the task force members' work and the county staff's work in helping me put this together.
Yes, indeed, and we appreciate it as well, the work that you and others are doing on this.
And Dr. Kane, if I can interrupt, for the recording secretary who is remote, Sandy, Bonnie Kellenberger has arrived.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, Bonnie. So the first things I want to do is a bit of process and remind everyone that, again, I know that you received this late in the week last week and may not have had a chance over the weekend to fully review it. So one of the things I will ask the task force members, we still have a couple weeks till our next meeting, and I would ask that we all provide Les with our input as we go forward on this, besides in this meeting. You're welcome to email Les, and as you know, with the Open Meetings Initiative, if you do copy all of us, we just can't communicate with you in that, if you copy all of us and send something to Les. But you're certainly welcome to either contact me or contact Les if you have any questions or want to discuss any element of this, of course, and just as long as we're in compliance with the open meeting law. Okay? I hope that's clear. With that, I was really going to do, my proposal here today is really to just, first of all, to yield to you if you have any particular things that you want to address in this report, and I would go around and allow that. And prior to that, I do want to have a discussion on the ordering of the report, and give perhaps some general guidance on that, and get your feedback, get task force members' feedback on the ordering of the report. And then once we do the ordering report, I'll yield the floor to each of you for your any concerns that you have with this document to date. If there's anything you want to provide guidance on. And then after that, I'll be happy to jump in and provide additional suggestions to you on this fine report that you've aggregated and put together. And we understand, Les, this is a first draft. There's certainly some improvement that we all have to make, and contributions we have to make still, and we'll try to do that to make this a very useful report for the county commissioners. So with that said, is there any comments by task force members on how to proceed or what you want to accomplish today?
No.
Good.
Okay, good. Okay, with that introduction, Les, and committee members, I do want to talk really about the organization, and start really in a sense with the introduction. And I would ask the task force members, you've written, Les, an introduction. If you go to the introduction, I would ask the task force members if we can write a letter from all of us incorporating this introduction, and if you would allow me to draft that letter in our behalf and to send it to you all for your amendment and approval. It will include some of the remarks that he makes here, as well as some of the elsewhere where he thanks really people. And I think it would be appropriate if this comes directly from the task force members in the submission, as well as in a personal way to the commissioners, right? And thanking people. And if I wanted to just ask you if that would be acceptable, and any comments you have on that.
Sounds great.
Yeah, fine by me.
Okay, so it'll be an action item for me to write this letter. It will, as I said, it'll incorporate some of the remarks that you made in the introduction, as well as some other remarks as well. And just as perhaps a question of formatting or format, Mr. Knight, should this go on a letterhead of any sort, or should it just be a sort of blank piece of paper that's signed by the task force? We're going to write a letter, and the letter will be in front of in the beginning of the report.
We can put it on Department of Land Use Growth Management letterhead, since you are acting, since you've been assigned to our department.
Yeah, okay. we can
Though,
do that.
I mean, you could actually create a solar task force letterhead would be
Well,
fine.
I don't think we need to do that unless someone's got some extra time that want to do that, Brian. Otherwise, I think that would be appropriate to use that, and
Okay.
we will do that. All right. So I'll draft that. If you would send me that letterhead or
Very
send
good.
it to Les, we'll draft that. All right. Well, in terms of the table of contents, Les, and I have some specific suggestions, but the one note I want to note that there's a lot of preface material in this, and I would really like the task force principles and recommendations to be moved considerably, in the front so that it's a little bit, it's more obvious to the county commissioners what we are recommending. And so as a kind of guide, I went through it. I don't necessarily want to, give you too much prescriptive guidance, but I read the whole report. And I think there are a number of different headings that can be put in appendices. So we can sort of talk about that as we move forward, and I can provide that. But I definitely want that the principles and the recommendations be moved up considerably into the body of the report. So one of the so one of the suggestions, if we go, I know that there's a number of sections that are trying to be, and by the way, a lot of good and hard work here. So in providing you with these suggestions, please note that you've done some great work here, and our efforts here are just to make this as clear as we can for the commissioners. So I thought in particular, Les, if we just talk about the table of contents, the key solar concepts, what I would call key solar concepts for zoning in particular, right? That's what they're really for. And the solar project categories, especially the solar benefits and drawbacks, I would like to see a lot of that put in an appendix. And then I think we can start with the context for solar zoning. And if it's at that point, and potentially put solar project categories after the context of solar zoning, potentially.
So you're saying key solar concepts and solar benefits and drawbacks we could move to an appendices. So then you would, after the task force section, you would have the context for solar zoning. Then you would have solar project categories. Then you would want to keep the conservancy report section, and then go to principles and recommendations.
So I don't, we will have there is some explanation in there. There may be appropriate explanation that we can put prior to the principles, but I'm reluctant to put the conservancy report prior to our recommendations and our guidance.
Okay. Where would you like the conservancy report section moved? Put that in the appendices as well?
I think we can do that. There is some explanation in here, and we can get into that as we look at this document about what can remain and what can be put elsewhere, all right? So as I said, I didn't want to bury the lead here, and the lead is the recommendations that these task force members are making to the county commissioners, the principles and recommendations, that's what we worked on. So I want those to be as far up as possible in this report. I know you did put some of that and summarize that in the executive summary, but I would like to see these up further in the report. So that was the one general comment I had about the report. Does anyone want to make any additions or subtractions to the remarks I made on the table of contents as guiding, potentially guiding Les in his in development of this rewrite of this first draft of the report?
No, I agree with you. I think going from executive summary to the task force, the context for solar zoning, to solar project categories, principles, recommendations, the conservancy report, and then having key solar concepts and solar benefits and drawbacks in appendices makes sense
Okay,
to me.
great. Okay. Is that clear, Les?
Yes, would you like the, one question, would you like the conservancy report in the body after the recommendations, just prior to the conclusion? Would you like the conservancy report section also?
So I want to be careful about this report. In some ways, I know that we are using concepts from the Nature Conservancy report. I know that some of us have liked pieces of it, and some of us did not necessarily agree with the report completely. So my suggestion here is, again, that we might put this in an appendix, knowing full well that the task force is really making these recommendations, and that the Nature Conservancy was just making their suggestions to us, and we considered their suggestions, and now have reflected them in the body of this report.
Okay?
Okay? Very good. So with that, I want to now hand it off to the floor in some ways to go through each member if there was a concern. And as I said, and with a caveat and agreed that you may not have gotten through all this, but I do want to at least start with you and any concerns or perhaps any clear errors on our part, reflecting that much of what he has done here is really reflecting what the task force has done. So it's possible in the course of this that we made some mistakes, and so I want to be sure that everyone, there was nothing glaring or any of deep concern. You'll have a chance to do this on your own as well, in the privacy of your own home, and then provide some additional suggestions to Les as we go forward. But I wanted to be sure publicly that each task force members had, if they wanted to say, if there was any concern they had up front with either any particular content. So with that, I'll open it up to any task force member to make any suggestion that they might have. And then after that, we will consider your suggestions, and then we'll go through page by page a bit and see if there's anything in particular that we would like to give guidance to on this report.
Well, I have not read it from cover to cover yet.
Yep.
But one thing I would request is that maybe we get this in Word as well for annotation and then working through the document. PDF is fine. I have the ability to annotate PDF, but others may not, so.
I do not.
Excellent.
So I figured Word might be easier for people to make edits on.
That's
Just
yes, indeed. So that's a great idea, and yes, to the degree that we can do track changes in a master document, that would be good. And Sandy, let me note that for your benefit, right, that Mike Thompson has joined us.
Okay, and I'll have the Word document sent out this evening after the meeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, just one comment I had was on page 12. We kind of discussed this before, but I think it's probably not quite proper to call them foreign-made solar panels, because pretty much anything you get is going to have foreign-made components and foreign-made parts, and so I'm not sure foreign-made has to be in there. It's just that the solar panels can present a security risk.
And this is on page 12 on military concerns.
Yeah. Like I say, I'm not sure you can find a solar panel that doesn't have foreign-made something in it.
Without objection, I have no concern about that. A sentence still remains clear to the commissioners and to everyone. Any other general suggestions here that anyone saw? And again, appreciate your remarks, Jeff, that you did not get to read the whole report, and I know this is true of all task force members. We couldn't expect you to read it in just really one working day or 2 working days, so give you another minute, and then we'll open it up and go through this document together.
Dr. Kane, I'm looking at the executive order from the White House. They use the term foreign adversary. So, just food for thought.
In that sentence, I don't think it would necessarily fit in that sentence, foreign adversary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the point is well taken, that they're probably all going to have some foreign components in them, but more importantly, there's potential security risk here.
And I think we know that pretty much anything is subject to foreign manipulation. So I'm not sure you can say this category and not that category.
The point is that they'd have to be assessed.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Right.
And that's still I think the meaning of the sentence, so I'm good with that. Thank you. All right, any thoughts here? None, no, it appears that there are no other general comments on any of this after we, and just for your benefit, Mike, we talked a little bit about the organization of the report prior to this, and I'd be happy to fill you in at the end of this.
Sure.
So we can go through it, and if we go after the table of comments, as I said, the introduction will be a letter now, so you can strike the introduction. And I invite the task force members to very carefully consider the executive summary, not necessarily immediately, but a little bit directly, providing direct comments to Les. But I think the general idea here, Les, was you were trying to really not only set the context a bit for why we're doing this, but also what the main recommendations of the task force was. So I thank you for that. I have very specific recommendations on language that I'll be able to share with you, Les, on that on the executive summary. And as I said earlier, when I share my remarks, I'll share them with all the task force members when I send them to Les, but I will not ask you for a response, since that we can't really do that, but you're allowed to individually respond to me, not respond to the group. We have the task force. And I do want to make a couple comments about this. I think it's on page 6, so I'll look at this. I haven't marked it up yet, so please bear with me while I look. I think this was all correct here. We now are going to move the key solar concepts to an appendix. And then any comments on key solar concepts?
On the net metering, would it make sense to put the general limit on that is 200% of consumer usage,
I think that makes sense, right?
since that's by definition?
Yep, and that's what net metering is. So can I ask you to send that to Les?
Yep.
And make sure that he gets that and properly put in where this is in net metering, or make the recommendation right now, whatever you like.
Well, the only addition would be that it's currently limited to 200% of the, how would you say that, Jeff, the annual usage? Or
Yeah, that'd be
something?
right.
Okay. So I think that's all that has to be in there, really.
Yep. And I know, I did have a question about this, about, was it community? Yeah, it's later. Prior to this, I just want to note, when in the task force, I did have something, excuse me for jumping around less. But the task force, we did not mention, I think here, that we did get, I think, a considerable amount of, we consulted with the Land Use and Growth, Department of Land Use and Growth Management. And I think they should be also mentioned as one of the organizations that we consulted, since we frequently consulted them, either here in the meetings or through email. And that would be really in the task, the part of this report entitled the task force.
Also the credits page.
In the credit space, and that, I will put credits in the letter.
Okay, so we're
And
sure.
that'll be a thank you that we will provide to them.
Okay, so this will be incorporated into the letter. Okay.
Is there a reason or justification in some ways to keep an appendix of all the people that attended the meetings and gave us with recommendations? Is that customary in reports?
So that's somewhat variable. I don't know what the St. Mary's County practice would be.
And I, I don't have enough experience reading this type of report to honestly tell you what is expected here in St. Mary's County.
Yeah. So normally in reports that go out from the state, at least, right, you always put an appendix that lists all the people that came before the task force and provide it kind of kept formal counsel. So if we could do that, Les, do we have that? I think we have it.
Certainly.
Could we do that, Les?
If I could get all of the minutes from the task force, yes. I'm not sure that all of the meetings have minutes posted on the website at the moment.
But Sandy can certainly put together that list and send that to Les.
Well, that would be great, Harry. Sandy, were you able to do that? Okay, well, we'll hope she's able to do that, and so.
I can do that. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
No worries. No worries. So, yeah, so we'll do that, and then we'll have a complete list of, the commissioners will be able to see who we spoke to directly, and I think that's just a matter of transparency for the commissioners, that they know that.
And then how long the supplemental materials that we had, like the presentations, the PowerPoints, those sorts of things, I mean, do we keep that on our open, as part of the open meetings?
The St. Mary's County government's model right now is managed through a software known as Board Docs. So it's there, it's archived.
Okay, so it's not good, so we could, that is a reference note we could put in here of, they could
That's a
visit.
great point, Bonnie. And so I think in that, we'll note that all the materials are available on Board Docs.
Yeah, Les wrapped it up, I guess it's that task force section.
Videos.
Videos of
Yeah.
each task force meeting can be found. Additionally, agendas, minutes, yeah.
Yep. I think, and I appreciated that, Les, that you did that. But I think that, I think citizens might be willing to look at some of these videos, but commissioners are busy people. And so that's why I want to summarize who came before the task force, so that they can see who came. And if they want to, of course, look at any of these, they'll be welcome to do so. All right. Noted about the key solar concepts, so thank you for that amendment, Mike. Any other suggestions on that, or how about solar project categories now? and had a quick question. I had a quick question for you, Les, and possibly Jeff Shaw on community solar. This is on page 9. You see the second sentence, community solar projects are small-scale projects of 2 megawatts or less that provide energy to 2 or more electricity customers within a utility service territory. I know that aggregate net metering is 2 or more customers. Is that also just true? That definition satisfies community solar? Since that's not my understanding really of how community solar generally works, it's not just 2 customers, but an aggregate number of customers.
I'd have to go back and reread the wording of it. They would like it, obviously, to be more than 2 subscribers. And I know there is language somewhere out there that describes that no one entity can subscribe more than a X percent, and I want to say that's like 50 or 51% or something, so. Yeah, I think the answer is yes, but I'd have to go do some research.
Okay, so would you,
I'm fairly sure that that language mirrors what the statute provides for utility scales, for community solar.
okay. Okay,
I will triple check that, but I'm fairly certain that that is the language that the state uses in its description of the community solar pilot program.
thank you, Les. I wasn't sure of that, and that's why I raised it. Any other comments there? If there are no other comments, we can go to the solar benefits and drawbacks. We'll just go through this in order, even if the order is changed at the end of the report. Les, I'll have some specific language recommendations here. I do think that I'll be, honest about my views on this, and I don't know if other task force members share this, but I see solar really presenting really not so much drawbacks, but challenges for development. But one of the reasons that the task force was created was in order to really help the commissioners meet these challenges, and I think it's going to present some really important opportunities for St. Mary's County. If we do this right, we're going to be able to develop it right, and I think the citizens of St. Mary's County will benefit by additional solar. So it's not that I want to suggest that there are no drawbacks here, but that really I think that to emphasize to the county commissioners that there's some challenges, and those challenges that we need to be able to sort of address in this report, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think one of the things, these challenges that you did get right, and that is some of the challenges that they can be land intensive, that there's a potential loss in farmland, and certainly there can be technical issues associated with the grid, and so on. The manufacture of solar panels, all these things we talked about in this solar task force, and I think we tried to address almost all of them in one way or another in the recommendations. So I would sort of say maybe suggest to you, Les, that we call these benefits and perhaps challenges to development rather than drawbacks of solar per se.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to give you specific language in the next week about that. I have some edits that I don't want to bore the task members with, but they'll see all those recommendations and suggestions that I have on edits. Any other thoughts on solar benefits and drawbacks section?
So one of the things that I'm a little concerned about with this is that solar isn't unique to loss of farmland. It is not a development that is special in its use of farmland. Lack of grid capacity is a solar-specific concern. Land intensive is a solar-specific concern. Baseload generator challenge is a specific concern. Loss of farmland is a zoning concern, because any development is going to want farmland over any other kind of land. Solar is not unique in that. That's a comprehensive zoning issue more than it is a solar unique issue. So I would ask that we remove that specific piece, because that's a development issue across the board versus a
I
very
agree with
specific
Bonnie.
solar.
I do agree with you very much on that. Thank you. Yep, I
But
do.
you, don't you still have to put some sense of perspective in here of what, maybe it doesn't belong here, what this is gonna do in Maryland? I mean, they talk about between 7,000 and 33,000 acres of agricultural land in Maryland.
Well,
Okay.
it's land, so
Right.
whatever that
I,
looks like.
I'm just saying that's a concern,
Yeah.
but
And,
maybe
but I
not
think
our
I
concerns.
think that's covered in the land intensive piece of solar is a land intensive development. But loss of farmland isn't unique to solar. That's development.
I think
across the board.
that's, I agree with your comment here. I would say I would like it somehow reflected though, because as you know, utility scale solar presents, farmland in particular is of most interest to large solar developers, only because the land is already cleared and it presents the most cost-effective utility scale installation. And therefore, it does present a special, there's some special consideration here, right? As is noted. So would it be acceptable, rather than say loss of farmland, to put it in land intensive and maybe put those two together, noting that farmland faces some risk associated with utility scale solar? Or do you feel
like any other development.
like any other development?
Right. If that's in there, I would say that would be appropriate. Does that make sense?
Is that considered a friendly amendment, Bonnie, or not?
I believe Bonnie's in the same shoes as I am. We're just trying to protect the agricultural farmland in St. Mary's County.
Full stop.
And and she's been doing that from the first day at this task force. She's been looking after what I'm looking after, the agricultural farmland, the farmers, and the people who enjoy eating. You keep taking the farmland away, you're gonna stop eating. I mean, that's the basic thing that I look at on my side of being on this task force. I had been talking, before this even hit St. Mary's, I was already in talks with some of the solar people out on the Eastern Shore area. And like I say, the farmland was the top priority to go after. It's just like a developer. He's gonna, if you notice, they buy the farms up. It's easy pickings. They put enough money out there, they're gonna get it. Same thing's gonna happen with these solar companies. They're gonna
So-
do the same thing. As what you can do is if you take and you go to a farmer that's only leasing his land, say he has 20 acres of land, he's only gonna make $2,000 a year, if they pay him $100 an acre, he's only gonna make 2,000 something off of his land. You bring a solar developer in, they're gonna offer him 20 to 25,000 a year. So that's the next thing you're gonna be looking at with the farmland. It's gonna be a money thing for the farm owner, landowner, et cetera.
The reason why solar farms, sorry to interject, but the reason why solar farms pose a different development pressure on agricultural land is because the other developments are zoned out of our agricultural land, for instance, commercial development, residential development is, the more intense is not allowed in the rural preservation district, which is where the bulk of our farmland is. So the comprehensive planning has seen to preserve the rural land with those zoning regulations. The state of Maryland and subsequently the St. Mary's County stopped housing developments from eating up farmland because now the maximum number of lots, state law, county ordinance, maximum number of lots any one parcel can create on septic systems is 7. So you will not see any more farms turn into residential housing developments. So just food for thought, I would say that the solar farms are now a new pressure that is replacing the previous pressure of housing developments in the rural land.
One of our recommendations was, though, that we were not going to, we had said no solar and rural preservation, correct? I mean, that was one
Well,
of our.
not that rural legacy. So you are correct. And I think so making that point is why I think, as Dr. Kane said, it would be good to have some mention of one of the challenges is preserving the farmland and, of course, the quality farmland, that with the better soils, because that's the setup for the explanation of why later the maps show don't put it here, don't put it there.
Okay. So I think going back to your land intensive and rolling that up into bringing up the farmland loss in land intensive is a friendly amendment.
Okay, so Les, and certainly again, I'll just reiterate, any task force member is free to provide language to Les on this. We'll try to combine land intensive and loss of farmland. We'll eliminate the loss of farmland topic, so to speak, but within it, we might say, please try to incorporate some of the challenges associated with farmland for large utility scale development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, right, it could well be a challenge in St. Mary's County. We don't know, right? But certainly we've tried to address this in our report as a potential challenge.
Okay, I got that.
Paragraph 3,
What's that? Yep.
lack of grid capacity. Maybe I need some education on this, but generally, my understanding is that the dispersed solar projects, especially the smaller ones, have virtually no impact because they're swimming upstream as to where the power was coming from in a lot of cases. I'm just,
Whereas utility scale is a little bit different, right?
it's
But-
different, that's
So
different. but
distributed solar
this
is one
says-
thing.
Yeah, this says the handle on these is rapidly shrinking. Is that valid, that it's rapidly shrinking, or it's not shrinking unless we have a project?
There's a couple of things going on there. From residential, there are areas within SMECO's system that are constrained. That's a given, and that's residential rooftop. And I think to what point Les is making in here, up to utility scale. With transmission, there are constraints within PJM of moving this power in and about. So from residential rooftop up to and including utility scale, it is not a given. That's why it has to go in for permit and review,
Permit review, right.
that we need to make certain that there is available space. Whether it's from a transformer perspective, which you can upgrade and move forward, but there is a constraint there because of transformer. Maybe it's line sizes next, line type.
And things are changing. Somebody, a major project may come in there that uses utility scale type power, and so where you didn't have a problem, you could have a problem.
That even happens in the residential setting. First person that comes through with the application could take away all the necessary available space left, and then everybody else is left to scramble. So I would say that this is a fact.
Generally speaking, the potential lack of grid capacity is something, it's a real thing.
It is.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for that clarification.
thank you.
Any other comments on the rest of this?
I do like your
Action.
heading change of solar benefits and challenges.
Yeah, so I'll suggest specific language there, and maybe that, right, with a bit of introduction that this is really, I think, look, this was what we were asked to do. These were the things were given us, the challenges and the benefits, and to put together a sensible set of recommendations that responded to all these.
Now, this might be just a minor item or whatever, but back on page 10, low maintenance. I'm not sure those last few sentences. I'm not sure how accurate they are or whether they are important. Common repairs include cracked panels, broken glass, and loose connections.
You want to address that, Les? That's in number 3, low maintenance.
Yes, so that was from, my research and came from, a solar reviews article that is generally seen fairly accurate, from a technical perspective and from a, generally pro-solar, publication, Solar Reviews. But this was where they did note, generally there's low maintenance, but where you do have problems, these are the types of problems you can get.
Maybe since the point you're making here, Les, is the low maintenance, that the sentence, the 2 most common causes for panels going bad, that, and then the next sentence, common repairs, that be put in a footnote.
Okay, I can move that to the endnote reference with the site.
Okay, yeah, that would be appropriate, I think.
And we're talking about low maintenance on how much it takes to keep these things up on a piece of land. So then if a farmer ends up taking some of his land and puts these solar panels on it, and then after the solar panels are installed, a while later, the grass is gonna start growing. That's something that an owner's gotta cut the grass around all these things, or does the company come back and keep the grass trimmed around them?
Typically, it's the developer that will do that. There are certain firms out there in the world of operations and maintenance of these that do that. That's part of the lease agreement you would strike with the landowner.
Gotcha. Something I was
Thank you.
thinking about.
Thank you for
Put out
that
there.
comment. Yep, I appreciate it.
The move afoot right now in the trend in the industry is using sheep.
Yeah.
So you don't have mowers kicking stones about. So you grow specific types of grass, pollinator habitats, butterfly habitats, and if you have to have grass, you
Just
mow it
something
with
I-
sheep.
Something I was thinking about, and I was like,
Yeah.
So the context for solar zoning, shall we go to the next section? I think this is an important section, Les, and I'm going to have recommendations on this going forward to, I think in general, you captured everything. I do want to be able to be sure that the main points for the context be sort of stated in the beginning, so that if the commissioners are reading this, I think you captured some of these very well. the context or the changing state laws for the renewable energy laws, and that's really the whole context of this, right? And then you also point out some of the agencies that the commissioners would need to know about in any, that in some sense informed our zoning decisions, and also the legal decision, the perennial decision, which also framed how we proceeded. So these are really important context, I think, for us, right? And then finally, you have, and I'm not sure if this should be a separate section, but then the role of local government in utility scale solar siting, I think you have there sort of set out very important considerations for the local government on how, how they would proceed. So saying that, I think this is a kind of critical section in the sense that the commissioners, to the degree that, they understand why we, in a way, it's setting the context for why we made the recommendations the way we did. We were constrained by a number of different laws and regulations already, and that's really what we tried to work with, and in particular, the perennial decision, as you noted very early, Les, in your discussion with us, that we needed to stay within the boundaries of that decision and yet provide guidance to the county commissioners so that we could, the county could actually get on the book zoning recommendations that would pass, that would not be challenged in court nor overturned somehow by the PSC. So that's just a general comment. I would say that the CPCN process, this might be put elsewhere in an appendix as well, so that if people want to know this exact process, it'll be there. So I would recommend that. And then, and maybe ask if anyone has a comment from the task force, the role of local governments in utility scale solar siting. It seems like an important topic. And the commissioners should certainly know about this. So it feels a little buried there, but I'm good with leaving it just as it is in some ways, or making it its own topic.
So if you go back to paragraph 1, sentence 1.
What page?
Context, page 13. I think in the way it's phrased, in my mind, I would cross out a sentiment that is also shared by the state. The next sentence says, Maryland has set aggressive and so forth.
Yeah,
Sentiment, to me, conveys an opinion, something that I would like to think about, something I like, so I think if we left that dash statement out, it would come across a little stronger. That's just the way I read it.
Exactly right, and many opportunities. I would also I already sort of gone through this on my own computer, and Maryland has set ambitious renewable energy goals, and would recommend that change as well, but as well as others. So understood there in that specific recommendation. Any thoughts about how the county commissioners might respond to the role of local government in utility scale siting? Do you feel like, having this as a separate topic, or are you good with it just as it is in this the context of really why we're doing this? And of course, you're free to change your views later this week when you go over the full report, but any thoughts from task force members?
I'd have to spend more time with it.
Okay, you need to look at it more
Yeah.
carefully. Understood? I think that's probably a view shared jointly by other task force members that need to really go through this some more, so I appreciate your suggestion there. So the Conservancy report, unless anyone wants to say something particular about this section, I'll move on to the Conservancy report as the next section. As we said, we'll probably move this below the recommendation, principles and recommendations section. And I'm particular, as just one task force member, I'm definitely sensitive that, not every commissioner will agree with the Conservancy report. And so in that sense, I don't want to over-recommend it. I think we've really used the findings of the Nature Conservancy report. We've adapted those findings by the task force and included really the maps that they produced as part of our recommendations and guidance on solar development.
So you bring up a good point. So as part of this, wherever we put it, we should change it to the Chesapeake Conservancy, so that we make sure we're
Yeah,
capturing the
Yes.
full name of the organization.
yes, indeed.
Sorry, not to derail what you were saying.
No, that's right.
So just on that point, I had identified the Chesapeake Conservancy earlier and used the abbreviation Conservancy throughout the rest of the report. But they get both the Chesapeake Conservancy and their Conservation Innovation Center is fully noted at the very start of the report. And then it's just an abbreviation.
Okay. I would ask, though, at least that the header says the Chesapeake Conservancy report.
Without objection.
Got it?
This first quote on page 18 from their report really repeats Bonnie's point of that the solar compounds the loss of farmland to residential and commercial development. It's acknowledging that there's the other pressures on the loss of farmland as well.
Noted. And I know we have to think about this, but and since it's going to be moved, it probably doesn't matter quite so much, but we do use some categories later in utility scale solar when we're trying to make some distinctions and of different authority. They were actually in our recommendations. That was what we did last week, which were, I think, this categorization that we recommended, and I think I'm looking for the page right now. It's in the beginning of the utility scale where you sort of review those, I believe. After Navy development zoning, I think they occur, there it is. This is in utility scale solar siting categories on page 32. We note the different categories that we discussed. Areas with no or limited authority, preferred areas, protected areas, and allowed areas that we use to help understand the zoning and use some of the, we definitely have adapted the categories of the Nature Conservancy report, because as you well know, they did not have really an allowed area. We have adapted that. So I note we'll have to come back to that in terms of, I think, making sure this is readable less. If we move the Conservancy report to an appendix, we'll have to just discuss how this sort of best fits and how the readability of this is. With,
Yes.
yeah, and I know, and again, not everyone had to get a chance to sort of read the whole report to feel its readability, and that's why we're going through this as we are today. The principles, I believe, are things that we all approved and voted on each and every one. So unless there's I don't think there's anything here unless there's a typo or some issue. And if there is some issue with what was written, please, make those recommendations directly to Les. And I note there are some typos in here, Les, that you noted in your email to all of us, and we will try to help you correct them as well. In terms of then recommendations, one of the things I want to note, and I think this is where the task force is going to have to weigh in and carefully look at this report. First of all, thank you, Les, for your the way in which you discussed this. We have the recommendations in bold that were approved by the task force members. And then under that, we have discussion of these points to help understand them. And again, I don't think, unless you all want to here, probably the best way to go through this is for each of us individually to carefully read this report and then provide our comments on each of these areas, right? The non-bolded portion or the context, and I think they did a really good job on this, Les, in trying to capture that context. So thank you for that. And with that, I don't want to necessarily go through all this because I think we all have not really read it carefully enough just yet. And so this would be somewhat arbitrary that as we are going on, the recommendations we're making here. And I apologize to you, Les, that we haven't been able to get through all this, but I think we still have some work to do here. But luckily, we have another meeting near the end of the month to go through it. But with that, I'll let people make any recommendation they have on the sections on first the general section. Then there's the residential accessory use solar. There's commercial, industrial, and institutionally accessory use solar, community, and utility scale. So they were the categories that we talk about in here, and they're the recommendations under each of these categories. It may make sense to me that in these recommendations, in the beginning, we have a kind of general discussion to help guide the reader in what they're going to see.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
one question that I had, with these recommendations, I was extremely careful not to make any substantive changes. I did catch a spelling error here or there and changed one verb tense to make everything consistent. However, if you see, and actually it's up on the screen right now, page 24, when I looked at the setback and height requirements for the commercial, industrial, institutional, accessory use solar, I did feel that perhaps the word "and canopy" should be added to this recommendation. So when you adopted this, it was just pole-mounted, ground-mounted systems should comply. So I, as a suggestion here, did add the words "and canopy." You could view that as a technical amendment or a substantive change. I did highlight it because it's potentially substantive, and if you do view it as such, you would need to vote on that to add those words.
And Les, is that intended to bring in the parking canopies?
Yes, or you actually, there can be canopies on residential properties covering parking spaces or even patios and decks. The canopy mounted systems are starting to become a little more popular for those things as well.
So I'll put this to the committee. This does not, this to me look like this looks like a friendly amendment of sorts to what we're trying to suggest, but I don't want to prejudge that and let you, let any task force member weigh in here.
No problem here. I think it's a friendly
Nope.
amendment.
Friendly amendment?
Yeah, I think we're good with this, Les. I think you can, this is a technical correction here. I think this was what we intended, so please include that, and thank you to alerting us to this.
Thank you.
So I did have perhaps my own technical question on page 28, decommissioning requirements. It struck me as potentially ambiguous, this. So a developer of a community solar project should submit a decommissioning plan to the county that describes how the site will be restored to its original state prior to the construction of the community solar project. Now, within 1 year after the community project ceases operation or is deemed abandoned. So I did not understand when we intended, it sounded like we intended that the decommissioning plan to the county will be done 1 year after, when would that be, I think? And I forget what we discussed here, but is this 1 year after the community solar project ceases operation? Is that what we intended?
Well, I think the intent is the plan is, how do you plan on bringing the site, how do you plan on decommissioning 1 year after the site has been abandoned?
Right, that's what
Yeah.
exactly, that's what I thought our intention was, but it doesn't read quite like that, at least to me.
And it does leave the question open of when do you want the plan? Now that I read it, I agree. It's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't, it says the plan should be subject to county approval, but when? Before construction, after construction, during construction?
Maybe it should be a developer of a community solar project should submit a decommissioning plan to the county, period. And then when do we want that as part of the package that they submit?
I think that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So isn't this purposely weak?
it was.
Right.
It was
Because
purposefully,
If I build a 10-story building, the county doesn't require any decommissioning. If I do any development, the county doesn't
well,
require.
it's true, but these are known to be limited use of 20 years or so.
This is a different
Yep.
category, so maybe it should be, but it
And
can only be so strong, that's all I'm saying.
thank you very much. Yeah, exactly, and I think you were exactly right, Mike, that we did intend this to be weaker. Notice there's no bond requirement here, right, on decommissioning that we had. And so if that's not with no objection here, that we put a period there and then make the rest of this grammatical in some way that I can't figure out right now.
Basically, it should just, at county, period, the plan should describe how the site will be restored to its original state prior to the construction of the community solar project within 1 year after. So,
Yeah. Do you have that, Les?
No, could you say that one more time, please?
sorry, so it should basically read, a developer of a community solar project should submit a decommissioning plan to the county, period. The plan
Okay.
describes, I guess, upon application, as part of the application?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's what it should say. A developer of a community solar project should submit a decommissioning plan to the county in the application process, period. The plan describes how the site will be restored to its original state prior to the construction of the community solar project within 1 year after the community solar project ceases operation or is deemed abandoned. Does that cover it?
Okay,
Is that about right?
can I make?
You want to read that back, Les? Just to be clear, we're trying to edit as a committee. It's always difficult. So please, go ahead, read that back.
Long work day.
So I do one suggestion, I will incorporate, a developer of a community solar project should submit a decommissioning plan to the county as part of its application, period. The plan should describe how the site will be restored to its original state within 1 year after the community solar project ceases operation or is deemed abandoned, period. The plan should be subject to county approval, period.
I think you captured
I
it.
think that's it, Les. Thank you very much. I think that captures what we wanted to say here, and I'm glad we were able to get that ambiguity.
So I just have a question for Harry. I'm very familiar with projects that have to be taken down because of community complaints, because they've been left abandoned, okay? Would this fall maybe in the same category that the landowner or somebody is going to be held accountable? We're saying we have no teeth in it, or it's no bond required or anything. But if, for instance, a property were obviously abandoned, let go, then I would assume it would fall back to the property owner to correct, under the direction of the county, the letting this go. Does that make any,
Yes, yeah, the
could
county,
fit that in there maybe, but
well, the county already has a blight ordinance.
Right.
So, properties that fall into a neglect, disrepair that meet the definition of blight, a subject I'm not an expert on, or then, go through the corrective actions, could be taken to court, et cetera. Yeah, I'm not a fan of, and I agree with your point, we don't make, office buildings, et cetera, plan ahead what they're going to do when the economy changes and the shopping center goes vacant. But this is a recommendation by the task force, and the next step, once the commissioners accept your report and take it into consideration, will be the drafting of proposed regulations to implement these recommendations or not.
And just for the record, right, I mean, almost utility scale solar or larger utility scale always do have decommissioning recommendations associated with them. Obviously, and just for the record, right, you remember, and you correctly remembered, that we tried to make this a little bit more flexible in order for community solar to be started so that the financial requirements up front were not too onerous to the developer.
Yeah, and approximately 23 years ago, when St. Mary's County saw its first telecommunication towers, the advice we got from other communities who had already written regulations for telecommunication towers was, oh, you better get a tower removal bond put in there, or these things are going to be across the landscape in disrepair, out of service, and who's going to pay to take them down? Well, over 20 years later, we've never had to do that because they either get reinforced or replaced even. But as we know, they're just part of the landscape now, just like office buildings and shopping centers.
Thank you for that comment, Mike.
Yeah, those towers are hot commodities.
Appreciate that. Any other comments on these, this section of the report here in public before you really go and read in detail all the elements here and provide your substantive comments to Les prior to the meeting that we have coming up in a couple weeks? Any thoughts, any further thoughts here? Okay, that looks like a no with everyone. I know there's also a conclusion, but I think we can all work to provide Les with guidance on that. And I also think that, Les, is there anything else that you want us, could you give us additional guidance? First of all, is there anything explicitly today you would like us to consider before I move to adjourn? And Secondly, is there anything you would like us to consider once we take this document back with us to provide feedback to you?
Just a couple of small points, and I did catch a couple of errors in the headers. Despite that, might go into and doing a second proofread of this. Hopefully there are not too many remaining grammatical or spelling errors and so forth. I will add a few photos to this report. I was waiting until I got your substantive comments on this because the photos will help balance out formatting and obviously at the end make sure you don't have a heading at the bottom of the page and so forth, and that there's a proper spacing of text on each page. So I'll use a few photos here or there to handle where there's those spaces or to make the report look a little prettier with a little extra color, so it's just not some blocks of constant text. The footnote, the endnotes at the end do contain a lot of links and extra material. I did struggle on what an appropriate level of detail within the body of the text, recognizing that you did want to represent all of the details, and some level of technical information was necessary to be in the body of the report versus what's better put in the endnotes. If you have any concerns or issues with that, certainly please highlight those. You've already offered a few suggestions of moving some things to endnotes and maybe potentially putting an endnote back into the main body of the text. So any information on that is helpful. And you will have a Word document, so just when you do a comment, make sure you've got a username highlighted in that so I know who's saying what, if there's going to be multiple responses submitted as part of one document.
Yeah, so there is version control here that some people talk about when they have a big document. So for that reason, this is document that we have now. You're going to give us, Sandy's going to give us the Word document to this. She promised it. We'll use that until you tell us otherwise, right? And send out an updated document. Is that, so Les is the keeper of the version, and we have a version now. Let's make sure that it's clear what this version is, Les, when it comes back to us.
So this could be considered version 1. When I do a new document, I will highlight in the title that will be version 2. So you're making the comments. Everybody is working off of version 1 now, dated June 21st, 2021 on the cover page.
Right, which that's, so let's make sure that, yeah, we title them, as you said, version 1 or draft 1 of this report, and then if you make an update, it'll be draft 2, and that will be how we do version control. Any other
Okay.
comments from you, Les, for the task force to?
No, I think I've understood all of the proposed suggestions so far. I guess one other quick question, and this came up with with Bonnie's comment. I could do at the very start of the report a separate page of abbreviations, such as for the Conservancy. I referenced commissioners. When I put county in capital letters, that's St. Mary's County, so I'm not writing out St. Mary's County or the commissioner of St. Mary's County throughout the entire report. That adds a lot of verbosity to it. What I did was, there's two main ways to do that. One is the first time you use a term, you put in parentheses what the abbreviation will be. The other option is to just have a separate page right up front listing all of the abbreviations. Would the task force members be interested in that approach as opposed to the one I've used in the report?
I find it most helpful when I read reports that there is a list of abbreviations in the beginning of the report.
Yeah, I would agree with that, having that as a reference as you go through.
So that's a
Okay,
good
I will
point.
take out the parentheses abbreviations and make it a list instead.
Yeah, as you know, there's no, there's a lot of different conventions here, but, yeah, and you can, we'll just pick one of them, and, so if you want to, I think the first time you mention the acronym, it usually goes in parentheses in the body of the text is my normal convention that I'm most aware of.
So do both, the list at the beginning of the report and the parentheses.
Thank you, Mr. Knight, for translating me again and helping everyone understand what I've been trying to say, and I appreciate the translation.
I just have to repeat it to make sure I understand it.
Thank you very much. I think the one other thing I would just note is that we did speak about, you said pictures, but we did talk a little bit about having some of the maps in here potentially. The question is, should we have the maps in here, or should we simply have reference to the maps? I know they're high, you know, that a lot of pixels there, or whatever, data on those. It may shrink too small here, so it may not be appropriate. So I think we can leave it open to some degree, but if we may want to reference those at some point in this report, that we actually have these maps available, and that they're wherever they're at, whether or not they actually physically, there's a copy of them in the report, to me is neither here nor there, since if you can't really see those little dots on this sort of page, it doesn't really make sense necessarily to include them. More importantly, to just indicate where those maps are available.
I think adding them as a web link in the end notes, and then it's the question of where to,
Reference them in the body of the text, so to speak.
right, and it looks like it would be
Yep.
at the preferred areas.
That's
and
right.
the protected areas.
That's right.
Well, we did have the one map that was kind of our main map that basically showed the yes versus no, like our optimal versus preferred, or basically, it was our yes-no map, pretty much, right?
I think there were, thank you, Bonnie. I've remembered a lot of maps, 4 in particular, right? And then one that included all 4 categories.
Yeah,
So I think having one of each category, maybe the 5th of all the categories somehow, you know, so it's just clear, right? So, so that would be Les and maybe Harry, in the utility scale where you discussed it, we'll make reference to these maps in the beginning, where we talk about, where is it? Sorry, I'm lost my,
33, 32?
thank you, yeah, 32, right? We make reference to the 4 maps, the areas with no or limited jurisdiction, which it was a map, the preferred areas, the protected areas, the allowed areas, and then finally, the summary of all of those, right, in a single map.
Which, as you pointed out, is difficult to discern at the level of an 8.5 by 11.
It is.
But to reference then the end note website link.
Yes, yes.
Where they can see
Yes,
it.
yes. So I think, as I said, yeah,
Yep.
you're right. Yep.
All right,
So-
I finally got a homework assignment.
All right, did you, okay, and thank you for translating me again, and I appreciate that. Without you, I don't know what I would, do here, because Les wouldn't understand much of what I was suggesting. But anyway, with that, I think I have everything that I sort of wanted to speak to with Les and with you all. I'll let you have the last word here. I don't have any additional thoughts for Les. Any task force member have any additional thoughts that they want to provide here before I move to adjourn?
No additional thoughts, but Les, what is your absolute deadline to receive comments to give you enough time to incorporate, so give us a deadline.
One second here, pull up a calendar. Okay, so to have everything turned around and to allow for the counties, to print them out, I have to have the final product to the county no later than very early morning of the 21st. Noting that that weekend is Father's Day weekend, if you could have your comments to me by the close of the 15th, that is Tuesday, so that's just over a week. That gives me about 3.5, 4 days to incorporate everything in, handle any questions I might have, put in the photos and do the final formatting and still try to get it to the county, with maybe, by Sunday or that Saturday, for that Monday meeting. And also to get it out to you, obviously in a digital form prior to the meeting.
6:15 it
So
is.
that works, the 15th, Tuesday of June.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you for mentioning that, Jeff. So June 15th, you have your homework, everyone. So please give us your feedback on this, and to Les, and you're welcome to copy, as I said, all the other members. And with that, motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. Les, thank you very much. Mr. Knight, thank you. Appreciate it. Sandy, get better.
Thank you.
Counselor.